I found it really inspiring myself. And one of the things I found most inspiring was that we had such a representative sample of people from different sectors of the business community. And that allowed us to approach the double meaning of beauty at work. So not only how can work be beautiful, but how is beauty at work, God's beauty at work. We were able to do so from different perspectives. So we had seminars, one on beauty at work in investment, in theology, in communication. We had one on music, on technology, on social enterprise, on fashion, craft and design, and one on finance. So that is quite a spread of different parts of our economy. And we covered them all. And we had several of you speaking on panels on each of those topics. And we had a heart talker for those topics as well. So that really lifted my spirits when we were organizing this, that seemed to be possible, to be so broad, and that you all had really insightful things to say. And I want to draw out a verse of the Bible, which I kept hearing from quite a few of you. So for the sake of those especially who weren't there, let me repeat it. It's from 1 Peter 3, verse 4. And Paul is talking about women. And he says, and this can apply to men just as well, your beauty should not come from outward adornment, such as elaborate hairstyles and the wearing of gold jewelry or fine clothes. Rather, it should be that of your inner self, this is a beautiful phrase, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight. He makes a beautiful contrast here between outward beauty, which is all show, and this beautiful inner beauty. And it reminded me of a sonnet by Shakespeare, which Stephen can show on your screens, in which I think Shakespeare is making a similar point. And that might be helpful if you want to talk about this in a secular context. You can either quote 1 Peter 3:4, but if your colleagues aren't up to people quoting the Bible that much, you can quote Shakespeare with this sonnet 54. Let me just check. That's on your screen. Yeah, can you see that? It might not make a lot of sense in a short space of time to you, so you might want to read it later. But here it goes. Oh, how much more doth beauty beauteous seem by that sweet ornament which truth doth give. The rose looks fair, but fairer we it deem for that sweet odour which doth in it live. The canker blooms have full as deep a dye as the perfume tincture of the roses. Hang on such thorns and play as wantonly when summer's breath their marked buds discloses. But for their virtue only is their show. They live unwounded and unrespected fade, die to themselves. Sweet roses do not so. Of their sweet deaths are sweetest odours made. And so of you, beauteous and lovely youth, when that shall fade, my verse distills your truth. We're not going to explain everything in there, but just to take in this contrast that Shakespeare makes between a real rose, which has a lovely fragrance, and it even has a richer fragrance when it dies. As a real rose dies, it has a fuller fragrance. But canker blooms, that's an old-fashioned word for wild roses. So Shakespeare here is saying, but a wild rose, it has as deep a dye as a real rose. You can use it to dye things just as you can a real rose. But when it dies, its perfume dies with it, and it doesn't actually have much scent anyway. You might know that if you've got any wild roses in your garden. So he's making the same contrast, and he's talking about if we mix truth with beauty, it becomes really beautiful. If we have truth in our business as well as beauty, it will be a more beautiful business. If not, it's show. It's what Paul talks about with the gold and jewelry and the fancy hairstyles, and it's what Shakespeare's talking about with the wild rose. It's all show. It's just as showful as a real rose, but it doesn't have the perfume, and the perfume that lasts beyond its death. So it can fade like we can fade as we get older, but our perfume can get stronger. So I leave you with Paul, and I leave you with Shakespeare. And now we're going to have you great people speaking in their wake. And first up is Gary. Is Gavin.
You've done it again, Peter. Gavin, Peter.
So I'm sorry.
Thanks for raising my blood pressure, Peter. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Ooh, Gary.
Sorry,
I'm not Gary.
And Gavin was all set up to give us a talk at the retreat, but he had to leave to a family engagement, an 80th birthday party of his mother. So
my mum. Yeah.
We're unable
yeah,
to
I was.
But we're going to include it now. So Gavin, it's over to you. And my apologies.
Thank you, Peter. I was sad to miss out on the full. Yeah, that's all right. No, I was sad to miss out on the full extent of the retreat. So thank you so much for accommodating me in this bit. Yes, my name is Gavin Howard. I live in Cambridge. So the retreat was very handy for me. I'm a bit of a I'm a charlatan when it comes to business, because although my name's above the door of a local family commercial property company, I spend virtually my whole time in the charity sector. So I want to reflect on beauty of contrast today. I'd like to consider today the beauty of contrast. My family has just returned from a few days on the island of Jersey. We hadn't been there for a while, having visited regularly in the past, and it struck both my wife and I that in the last few years, it had become even more of a playground for the rich. I might be corrected by someone on this call, but I couldn't discern any areas of deprivation. In fact, a report in the Sunday Times some months ago described how the island has attracted more and more financial services companies, and it's becoming really difficult for the bar staff, waiters and waitresses to afford to live there. It was lovely to visit, but I couldn't live there myself. Personally, I couldn't cut myself off permanently from my fellow man or woman who's materially in need. I like to live in a place where there are families nearby who are distinctly different from me, as long as I know how to help them. I like contrast. And just trying to move there you go. I like contrast. And I think this world was created to have this contrast all around us. The poor will always be with us, but not if you're living in a sunny tax exile. And now we are in our British summer. We can look back on times during our long British winter when we were cursing the long, damp, dark days. However, we're now starting to enjoy a beautiful summer once again. Long summer evenings, cricket on college grounds, summer barbecues, and time to wander and explore rather than scurry back to huddle in our homes. Thinking still of contrast, I like a temperate climate of hot and cold. I'm not sure I could take a Californian climate with yet another day of sun. A life full of variety in weather and neighbourhood is fulfilling for me. I was reminded of this at our charity in Cambridge during the last few weeks. It's called FiBM, and it exists to help church people to serve serve those in need in the local community. We gather as a core team a couple of days a week to run the show, van runs, administration, paint kits, garden work, kitchen packs, bedding packs, furniture for those in need, all given by local Christians. Everything is done in community. Probably about a dozen Christians from about 9 or 10 different churches, all gathered to help the church as a whole to serve. We gathered on a Wednesday a few weeks ago to celebrate. We've had a wonderful time given recently called Tyrone, about the most American person I've ever met. And I've met a lot of Americans. He's thrown himself into things for the last year or so, but he and his wife were leaving to return to the States early last month. There was so much laughter and memory of sharing of a splendid chap. Then on the very next Monday, we gathered for prayer as normal to prepare for the day ahead. But as we all bring all we are to the day ahead, it became a mournful and sorrowful experience as one of our number was faced with a funeral on Wednesday of someone close to them, who was also known to some of the team. More contrast, the high of the previous Wednesday compared to the morning on the following Monday. Ecclesiastes 3, of course, talks about there being a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, and so on. In a business context, we could perhaps add that there's a time to buy and a time to sell, a time to speculate, a time to consolidate. Overall, as we lead our teams, our boards, our trustees, and so on, there should be space to recognise and respect this rhythm. I used to lead the team at the FiBM in Cambridge, and I think I was too task-orientated sometimes to recognise what part of the cycle the team was in. They would want to pray and look after each other when I knew that so much had to be done. My successor, Felix, is so much more attuned to the mood and senses what is needed. However, the output is the same, and the team are cared for in the process. I think God wants us to stay aware of what stage of the cycle we are in. So praise God for the beauty of rhythm, of ebbs and flows, of contrast, of keeping and throwing away, of tearing and of mending. And please, Lord, give us the discernment to know what phase we are in at all times. That's my bit. Thank you, Peter and Stephen, for asking me. I'm handing over to Esther.
Hello. Those are very interesting remarks. I have been thinking a lot about tension, and that is what you bring, in essence, contrasting that. So there's a lot to think about around that. So I want to reflect on some. I have been reflecting on the beauty in creativity, which is one of the some of the thoughts that I got from the retreat was that we have a responsibility to steward our gifts and the gifts of those around us, especially now in the place of leadership. It's not just about you, what you're doing. You're also thinking about the next person in the team that you're dealing with. So there's also you're not just stewarding your gifts and your abilities, but you're also entrusted with the responsibility of stewarding the gifts and the responsibilities, or the gifts and the abilities of the people in your team. And beyond that, Dawn gave a very, very beautiful talk, and she talked about being brave, which is what I have been really thinking about it, because for us to step out in these spaces, for us to be able to leverage and to develop our skills and to develop our abilities, we then need to get to a space where we are being brave, and we are taking the risk, and we are following wherever God is leading us. Because again, some of the thoughts that also came from that is that we will be called into spaces where we feel ill-equipped. There was the case where Nehemiah was put in his heart to rebuild the wall, and that was not his natural environment of work, but then he was called into it. So then again, we need to be brave to be able to step up and become the people who are able to steward then rightly, and then to help the world to bring the kingdom of heaven here on earth in our scale. So those are my thoughts. I'll pass it on to Kira.
Hello, everyone. It's lovely to... Can you hear me now? Sorry. Yes. Hello. Thank you very much for including me at this session. And also, I want to say hello to all the persons that I met at the conference, Fiona, Rob, and Peter. I hope I'm mentioning your name correctly. It's a pleasure to join you all again. Peter has mentioned how robust the conference was, and it's really nice to see all the different topics and issues being addressed by people. And to go further, I'd like to share my take on the conference in 3 parts. First of all, what I most appreciated about it, and that was the beauty of the true stories shared by people about their calling on God's calling on their lives, their careers and their businesses as a service to his kingdom, whether they're entering into a new business sphere or right in the middle of the challenges and dealing with breakthroughs or celebrating victories and asking how best to pay it forward into the community. All those true stories have stayed with me, and they have been, I would say, beacons of light, and also a form of encouragement and inspiration of how we're all in it together, and we are stronger together. The next thing I'd like to, I took away is something new. And I didn't realize there were Christian banks. So that's one aspect of information that I was very pleased to find out, because I've always asked, how do we support one another in the financial sector? We're very strong in philanthropy around the world. I think the Christian faith will be probably the strongest philanthropic mission-centered faith in the world, and I may be wrong, and so if I am, I'm sorry, but that's what I see everywhere, even in schools and all around the world. So I was very pleased to see that we have a growth in investment portals for various ventures, and we not only cover philanthropic activities, but a wider range of commercial ventures. I hope that increases beyond STEM and IT, but goes into various humanities sector with socioeconomic empowerment outcomes. That's so important as well. And that leads me to the final take on the conference, which is going forward and what we've learned. How do we grow this access to resources within our sector as Christian leaders, and breaking away from, not necessarily breaking away to abandon philanthropic assignments, but to expand and broaden commercial ventures so that we are able to support one another effectively. And I would like to say, like other faiths, because I find the Jewish community and the Muslim community have a very strong hold in how they empower one another. They see it as a duty to give businesses to each other, to strengthen each other, their communities. And we have an equally strong, if not stronger, incentive as Christians to practice the good news of the gospel through our businesses. And there's beauty in that, because we're reflecting God's first calling, meaning love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul and your mind. That's the complete being, but also to love your neighbor as yourself. So if you're looking to grow you, to enrich you, to empower you, you're a reflection of God, but that reflection passes on to your brother, your sister in the faith. And the more we extend that in the business sector, the more we are sowing seeds, and we are we're bearing fruit, the best fruit that's connected to the vine, which is our Lord Jesus, and to the tree of life, which is God. So I look forward to being part of that, and I look forward to doing not just that it's done in my community, but I'm part of pioneering what I do out in the world to uplift that for the business leaders and business people and the growing and the next generation in our community. So that's my take, those 3 things. Most appreciated, the new thing, and yes, I'll pass on to Peter.
Yeah, thank you, Kira Destiny. That's lovely, and it was lovely to have you and your daughter with us. That's great. Thank you. Norman has a few thoughts to share. Norman, your turn, if you unmute.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. And thanks to you and to everyone who organized a terrific retreat. It was my first, and I am confident it won't be my last. I guess a key takeaway for me, or the key takeaway really, is a very high level one. It's the beauty and diversity, because there were people at the retreat from all sorts of different walks of life. And yet together we're trying to do the same thing. And I just couldn't help thinking about that image from scripture of us being one body with many parts. If all the parts were the same, how could there be a body? Says Paul. And our churches may not always esteem our calling, but the retreat provided a lovely reminder that Christ does. In fact, Christ sees it as beautiful in his kingdom and in his purposes. I was driven to reflect on the Great Commission, the call to go into all the world with the gospel. And those of us on this call, we're not carrying the gospel to Papua New Guinea. We're carrying it into otherwise unreached regions much, much closer to home. Technology, retail, fashion, admin, even, as we were reminded, academic theology. One body, many parts, one body, many callings, one mission that unites us, one Lord over all. Beautiful. And on a practical note, I've had several follow-up conversations, which have been really encouraging with folk who I met at the retreat. So thanks for that also. And I look forward to continuing those conversations.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Norman. That's great. Now, some of you may wonder who weren't there, who actually spoke on fashion. You don't often hear talks on that at Christian conferences, but we have Karim here, and he was on the fashion panel. Karim, would you like to share your thoughts?
Yes, thank you, Peter, for having me and inviting me to be on the panel as well. I think, get straight into it, one of the key takeaways for me was humility. And I quickly read from John 14:15. If you love me, you obey my commandments. I will ask the Father and he will give you another helper who will stay with you forever. And it was a simple takeaway for me, was a surprise for many people who have accomplished great things in business at the conference, still displayed an incredible degree of humility in terms of their work and their approach to it. And one of the ones that really I took away the most was Grace Enterprises. I don't know if the founder is here today, but I love the whole concept of literally the whole purpose of the business was to help and serve those who are the most ostracized amongst community and amongst the community, amongst people, people that are deemed some of the most undesirable, so to speak, whether they're out of jobs, been in prison, so on and so forth. But how that related back to fashion, for me, it made me rethink of the intentionality behind why I'm doing my business. Is it purely just to make profit and revenue like we generally are told or informed in a capitalistic society? And so the beauty in that was to see people who have accomplished incredible things in business, but still the forefront of their mind was, how can I put Christ first in my business? How can I make sure that I'm doing my part to reveal the love of God, the empathy and the compassion through my work, through my craft, to people who may not know God at all. And even then, to those that do know him as well. And so it was a really eye-opener for me. It was very encouraging as someone who's worked in the fashion industry for such a long time. Is incredibly isolating in terms of people you can come in contact with that may share your values or your faith. And you may think that you now need to approach business in a certain way. But for myself, it was really encouraging to see so many people who have done years, 20, 30, 40 years in business, but still hold strong and steadfast to the principles and practices of Christ. And it showed for myself and my age group that, you know, there is this, you can take this route. You don't have to compromise your values, your faith. And not only that, it's beneficial to actually changing the culture in terms of business in fashion and business as a whole. So that was one of my key takeaways. And I'll probably rush through that, Peter, but that was swagger. You're on mute.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. That's fantastic. Actually, we extended the fashion panel to include craft and design, and Tapira is into craft and design, and she's got a couple of thoughts to share, and then we'll go into our time of discussion.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, it was my first time at the conference, and I didn't know what to expect, but I felt so welcomed, and it was just really amazing for me to be around, so many people, who are reflecting Christ, through their work and what they do and their passion for that. And I was just really greatly encouraged by how God is working in people's lives through business. And for me, this has kind of sort of been a sort of new concept for me, combining faith and business. And I came away with so many examples, so many stories that have encouraged me. I came searching for clarity as I have a business that's going through transition, looking at how better to let God show up in my work and to guide me. And some of my key takeaways were less resistance and more acceptance over pursuing the things God is calling me to do. And I've sort of gone from questioning why have you put me in this industry? Why have you put me in this place? I'm not sure how it works as ministry, to now saying, God, what is it you need me to do? Lead the way so that I can follow. And within my industry, within craft and design, there are a lot of businesses that embrace the commandment to love your neighbor as yourself. And that is something that I am working more and more now to try and reflect that through the work that I do, through the people that I connect with, and sharing their stories and in shining a light on what they do. And the retreat provided that space to, as I say, hear other people's stories, see how they're doing it. And it's just been, I'm still processing it. It's given me a lot to think about. But yeah, I mean, it's been a very, very good experience for me to go through that.